2003, Seattle, Washington. A dream job, a qualified woman, a company that never planned to treat her fairly. She was the most qualified person in that room. They promoted everyone around her, every single time. 30% less pay, 3 promotions denied, 2 years of documented proof. She had enough. She filed the lawsuit. The company fought back with everything they had. She did not move an inch. $2 million. 3 managers disciplined. 2 other women finally heard. This is Vanessa's story. Her name was Vanessa, 31 years old, a marketing professional living in Seattle, Washington, who had spent 7 years building the exact qualifications, the exact experience, and the exact track record that her dream job required. She had a bachelor's degree in marketing, a master's in business communications, 4 years of agency experience, and a portfolio of campaigns that had generated measurable results for every client she had ever worked with. When the offer came from a large Seattle-based corporation in the spring of 2003, she accepted without hesitation, because this was exactly what she had been working toward, exactly the level she had been building to reach. She walked into that building on her first morning feeling something she had worked hard to feel: ready, qualified, and exactly where she was supposed to be. The department had 40 people in it: marketing strategists, campaign managers, account leads, creative directors, and Vanessa was one of only 3 Black women among all of them, a fact she noticed immediately and filed quietly away. She told herself it didn't have to mean anything, that she would be judged on her work, on her results, on the quality of what she produced. And for the first few months she believed that, because the work was going well and the feedback was positive. Her first major campaign exceeded its performance targets by 32%. Her manager praised it in a team meeting, her colleagues nodded, and she felt the satisfaction of having proven herself in a new environment. 6 months into the role, a senior strategist position opened up in the department, 1 level above Vanessa's current position, a role she was not only qualified for, but had been informally told she was being considered for. The position went to a white male colleague with 3 fewer years of experience, a thinner portfolio, and performance reviews that were, by every available metric, less strong than Vanessa's own. She told herself it was one decision, one hiring choice, that these things happened and didn't always mean what they appeared to mean, and she went back to work and produced results that were even stronger in the following quarter. 8 months later, a second position opened, this time a campaign lead role that Vanessa had not only applied for formally, but had been specifically encouraged to apply for by her direct manager during her last performance review. The position went to a white female colleague who had joined the company 4 months after Vanessa, and whose performance reviews, which Vanessa later obtained through legal discovery, were rated consistently lower than her own. Vanessa sat with that for a long time. The second rejection, the second time someone less qualified had moved upward while she remained exactly where she had started, and she began keeping records. Detailed records, dates, decisions, names, meeting notes, email threads, performance comparisons, building a quiet and meticulous documentation of everything she was experiencing because something in her told her she would need it. The third promotion denial came in early 2005, a director-level position, the most senior she had applied for, a role that her manager had told her just 3 weeks earlier she was the strongest internal candidate for. It went to a white male colleague who had been at the company for 18 months, less than half of Vanessa's tenure, and whose work she had personally collaborated on and improved in ways that her name never appeared on. That same week, through a conversation with a trusted colleague who had access to salary band documentation, Vanessa discovered that male colleagues in roles equivalent to hers were earning an average of 30% more than her annual salary. 30%, not a small rounding difference, not a minor variance that could be explained away by tenure or performance. 30%, consistent, documented, and impossible to attribute to anything other than a deliberate structural inequality. She went to HR the following Monday, calmly, professionally, with her documentation organized and her language precise, and presented what she had found and what she had experienced across 2 years at the company. The HR manager listened, took notes, thanked her for raising her concerns, told her the matter would be reviewed internally, and sent her a follow-up email 4 days later, informing her that no policy violations had been identified. She went to her direct manager the week after that, laid out the same information, the same evidence, the same pattern, and he told her that these things took time, that she was valued, that she needed to be patient and trust the process. She went home that evening, sat at her kitchen table, and called an employment attorney named Caroline, whose name had been given to her by a friend who had faced something similar at a different company 2 years earlier. Caroline listened to everything Vanessa said: the 3 promotion denials, the pay disparity, the documented performance record, the HR dismissal, the manager's response, and she was quiet for a moment before she said, "We have a case." Vanessa filed a formal racial and gender discrimination lawsuit against the company in the summer of 2005, citing violations of Title VII of the Civil Rights Act and the Equal Pay Act. 2 years of documentation attached to the initial filing. The company's response was immediate and aggressive. A team of 6 corporate lawyers assigned to the case, a counter-narrative constructed around Vanessa's performance, questions raised about her qualifications, suggestions that her promotion denials had been based purely on merit. They requested months of delays before discovery, challenged every document Vanessa's legal team submitted, and made clear through their approach that they intended to make this process as long, as expensive, and as exhausting as possible. What they did not anticipate was that Vanessa had already told her story to 2 colleagues she trusted, both Black women in the same department, both of whom had been living versions of the same experience in silence for years. Both women came forward within 6 weeks of Vanessa's filing, with their own documentation, their own records, their own pay disparity evidence, and the individual lawsuit became a class action that was significantly harder for the company to contain. The 3 women's legal teams combined their evidence, 3 separate but parallel patterns of promotion denial, pay inequality, and HR dismissal, creating a picture of systemic discrimination that was no longer possible to attribute to individual decisions or isolated circumstances. Discovery produced internal emails that damaged the company's position significantly. Communications between senior managers discussing diversity optics without any corresponding action. References to keeping certain roles quote-unquote culturally aligned. Salary band decisions made without any documented performance justification. The case went to trial in early 2007, 18 months after Vanessa had first walked into Caroline's office, and the courtroom was packed on the opening day with journalists, advocates, and current and former employees of the company. Vanessa testified for 2 full days, calmly, precisely, with documentation for every claim she made, and she did not waver once under cross-examination, despite the corporate legal team's sustained attempts to rattle her composure. The 2 other plaintiffs testified as well, each adding their own layer to the pattern, each describing the same culture of dismissal, the same HR responses, the same quiet accumulation of being overlooked and undervalued in ways that were never quite explicit enough to be undeniable in isolation. But together, the 3 of them, with 18 months of combined legal preparation behind them, they were undeniable. The jury deliberated for 2 days before returning a unanimous verdict in favor of all 3 plaintiffs on every count filed. The company was ordered to pay $2 million in combined damages across the 3 women, Vanessa receiving the largest individual award as the lead plaintiff and the employee with the longest documented record of discrimination. 3 senior managers were formally disciplined as a result of the verdict. 2 received written censures that became part of their permanent employment records. 1 was demoted from his director position effective immediately. The court mandated a comprehensive overhaul of the company's promotion and compensation practices, independent audits for 3 consecutive years, a court-appointed monitor to oversee implementation, mandatory bias training for all management staff. The verdict was covered nationally, major newspapers, business publications, employment law journals, and the company's name became associated in press coverage with exactly the kind of workplace culture it had spent years publicly claiming not to have. Vanessa stood on the courthouse steps after the verdict with Caroline beside her and the 2 other plaintiffs on her left, and she said to the reporters gathered there, "I did not do this for the money. I did this because silence is not the same as acceptance, and I was never willing to accept it." She left the company shortly after the verdict, not because she had to, but because she chose to build something new in an environment she had chosen rather than one that had spent 2 years trying to diminish her. She started her own marketing consultancy in 2008, built it from the ground up, hired intentionally and inclusively, and within 3 years had a client list that included companies specifically seeking to work with a woman who had demonstrated she understood both the work and the stakes. The two other plaintiffs also moved forward. One started her own business, one found a senior role at a company whose culture she had researched carefully before accepting, and all three stayed in contact, checking in on each other, marking the anniversary of the verdict each year. Racial and gender discrimination in the American workplace remains one of the most documented and most persistently unaddressed problems in employment law. Studies consistently show that Black women face compounded disadvantages in hiring, promotion, and compensation that white women and men of color do not face to the same degree. Most cases never reach a courtroom because most people cannot afford the legal fees, cannot sustain 18 months of procedural delays while continuing to work or look for new employment, cannot absorb the professional risk of being known as someone who sued their employer. Vanessa could sustain it, barely, with sacrifices she has spoken about openly, and the two women who joined her could sustain it together in a way none of them could have alone, which is why finding each other mattered as much as any piece of evidence they filed. If you are experiencing workplace discrimination, document everything from the beginning, find others in your workplace who may be experiencing the same thing, and contact the EEOC or an employment attorney before you assume there is nothing to be done. The law exists to protect you, but the law requires you to use it, and using it requires documentation, persistence, and the willingness to stand in a courtroom and say clearly and on the record, "This happened, it was wrong, and I will not pretend otherwise." Vanessa did exactly that, and $2 million later, 3 managers disciplined, and a company's practices exposed nationally, the record shows that she was right to do it. Subscribe to Dark Chapters US, because there are many more chapters left to uncover, and none of them are easy to read.